All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Fitzsimons, Vice President of Leadership and Engagement at Lead San Diego, which is an affiliate of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for being with us today for our webinar, Leading in a New Reality. I hope that you and your teams and your families all are doing well. At Lead San Diego, we're focused on connecting and empowering leaders so that they can positively transform themselves and their organizations and our community. And that's what we're trying to do here, empower you through this crisis as you lead your teams and as you lead your families, and connect you with the experienced leaders like we have today, so you can learn from them. The point of these webinars is that you leave with actionable steps that you can put into practice today. Our partner on this series is the team over at Jones, whose mission it is to develop leaders and human systems that counter oppression through diversity, inclusion, and organizational effectiveness. At the controls, as always, is my colleague and lead program manager, Kim Nguyen.
Hi.
Hey, Kim, thank you. Please send us your questions through the Q&A or the chat function, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. We're going to spend about 12 minutes in conversation with each of our guests, and then we'll take questions from all of you for about 20 minutes. This webinar is being recorded, and we're going to post the video to the Lead YouTube channel and email out the link afterwards for viewing later on. Today, we're talking mental health and balancing the expectations, emotions, and mental hardships of work and home during this crisis. The topic of mental health and emotional well-being has come up in every webinar we've done so far since we launched this series, and we thought it was time to devote a full session to it. There's uncertainty and anxiety, there's grief and anger and emotional and physical exhaustion and boredom, and also some relief and optimism and joy and maybe some guilt about feeling those things too. So here to help us pack all of that and understand what's happening in this moment and how we can effectively help ourselves and our teams and our families, the people that depend on us, are Shanna Teel and Shabazz. Shanna Teel is the founder and CEO of Dr. Shanna Teel and Company Incorporated, a leadership and organization development consulting firm. In Dr. Teel's career, she has been a partner and executive in 3 international consulting firms, and she is also a consultant with our partner, Jones. She holds a dual Ph.D. in industrial organizational psychology and clinical psychology, a postgraduate certificate in neuroscience and nutrition science, and has more than 22 years of experience as a business and leadership consultant, executive coach, speaker, and author. Welcome, Dr. Teel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're glad you're here. Shabazz is San Diego City College president. Dr. Shabazz provides executive leadership at one of the most innovative and socially active community colleges in the nation, with a focus on student completion, success, and social justice. He has more than 18 years of executive experience and a Doctor of Education and Educational Leadership. Dr. Shabazz is a team builder with an accomplished record of improving access to higher education, developing collaborative partnerships, cultivating improved institutional practices, and promoting innovative solutions and dialogue. Welcome, Dr. Shabazz.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you both for being with us today. Shanna, we're going to start with you.
Okay.
Can you please describe what you're seeing out there? What are the common themes and why now?
Okay. Yeah, so I think for most of the country, we're in week 8, right, of the shelter in place, maybe plus or minus a week, depending on exactly what state you're in. But you know, I think the theme I'm seeing this week that mirrors the themes of the earlier weeks is just uncertainty. There's still a lot of uncertainty. And I think people are, although getting maybe a little bit more comfortable or accepting, maybe not comfortable, but they're accepting the uncertain state. And it's a word I hear every day, multiple times a day. It's been really interesting to see how people have shifted their words. I'm hearing uncertainty as a primary word people are using, right next to crisis and pandemic and unprecedented times. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing, yet despite that, I'm also seeing that people now, in terms of themes, people are now in some routines, not necessarily that they're ideal or perfect, but I think having a sense of routine, whether, you know, that's in your home and It's helping people, it's helping families. So that has been a positive, which also routine and a little bit of control helps us calm our nervous systems. You know, the theme of increased communication and connection has been pervasive. I think we're all connecting more. I think I hear so many leaders say, I'm having conversations and connections with my team in very different ways. Obviously, we're entering into people's homes. The boundaries have blurred there a little bit. But yet in that blurred boundary, I think it has allowed us to step into a human experience in a very important way and connect in a really important way. You know, we were talking a little bit before everybody joined us today, but you know, we used to have very distinct categories. We have work, we have home. I know some of us work from home. I've always worked from home for the last 22 years, so it hasn't really changed for me, but for the majority of people, those have blurred. And that has been alarming to blur all those categories, and resources have been taken away at the same time. So not only do you have blurred boundaries between work and home, and work is now in your home, but you also don't have all the resources like childcare that you used to have. And you also have potentially a partner or spouse also at home who's in your space, and you're having to interact and manage that. I've also seen increased focus on what really matters. I find that people are using, for the most part, these sort of calls in a very intentional way. Unlike, you know, sometimes all of us have been in the meetings, in our team meetings and weekly meetings that just go on and on and on, and the purpose seems to disintegrate over time. I feel like it's allowed people and teams and leaders to get really clear about what the purpose of the meeting is, and to get what needs to be done in a shorter period of time versus letting things go on and on. So I think that is an awesome pattern that hopefully we can repeat even as we begin to transition back. High stress, fatigue, exhaustion. And I think, you know, you mentioned that in your setup, Elizabeth, but that high stress and fatigue is, our brain is on hyper alert, one, and it's also incredibly open and primed right now for learning. And we're open, our brains are open and making massive amounts of connections. So that alone adds to the fatigue that we're dealing with. So there's a neurological fatigue that's happening, and then there's a very practical fatigue and a role fatigue, because we're all having to shift roles, and especially parents with children in households. You know, one minute you're leader, the next minute you're chef, the next minute you're craft guru and the Zoom guru, and all of these things that you weren't having to shift between. I think it's interesting, those of us that have humbled ourselves being really great at multitasking, we've been humbled because we're not so great at it. And actually, if you read any of the research on neuroscience, it says that multitasking is not really a thing. It's just your brain is switching at a rapid pace, which causes exhaustion. So those are just a few of the themes I'm seeing, both kind of positive, negative, and neutral.
I feel like I've seen so much in the media lately, but, you know, stories about, you know, hitting the wall, Zoom fatigue. I mean, why do we seem to go through these phases collectively? Like, what's at work there that is kind of binding us together in these experiences, and the those, you know, that hitting the wall? Like, why are we hitting the wall in this week and not 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. Well, I think we're establishing new patterns, right? So much about our life and our learning is about patterns and creating new patterns. And so neurologically, we're putting our brain to work, and we put it to work to learn new things at a rapid pace in the midst of fear, in the midst of uncertainty. And when we're creating new patterns, it's absolutely exhausting. And not only that, but we are having to create them without choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's different than when you say, oh, hey, I'm gonna choose to work from home, or my company is now offering one day a week to work from home, and this is cool, I get to choose it. Mm-hmm. But when you take choice away, it's very disempowering. Not to mention, at the same time, we have to be establishing new routines, and everything is new, right? So I think that's part of the collective experience we were having initially. I'm seeing a little less fatigued now in terms of learning the technology and learning new processes with your teams and shifting your business operations. There's more fatigue now, I think, for parents who have kids at home, and you're in, you know, I don't know, week 4 or 5 of shifting their schedules and managing their energy. You know, you're not just managing your personal energy anymore, or the energy of your direct team. You're having to manage the energy and the the learning curve of all your people at home too. So I think it's just been exponential, the amount of learning and new patterns that are being created. So
can you say a little bit more about that for those of us who are in the position of learning homeschooling and also leading your team? And how are you seeing in your clients that frustration and overwhelm show up, in what kind of behaviors, and how can we be mindful of those things?
yeah, so I think part of the frustration and overwhelm, I think, can show up, you know, there's healthy adaptations to it and there's not, and there are unhealthy adaptations. I think the unhealthy place I'm seeing it is there are some people that slip back into denial, some people that are using distraction and avoidance as a way to kind of cope. And that's personally as well as professionally. I have to say I've definitely laughed a lot at the moms hiding in the closets away from their kids with a glass of wine. You know, I think that's very real for people, but I think we can all laugh at that and connect with it because it's like, I just need a moment for me. But the unhealthy things is avoidance, denial, distraction. And I think there's a lot of self-medicating probably going on too. I read a statistic that alcohol sales are up like 45%. But we're eating more, we're snacking more, we're drinking more. And I think what we want to focus on during this time, especially because, like I said, with our brains being so open and primed, because we have just been thrown into making our brains fire in a completely different way, we have to be really careful that what we're consuming, whether it's good or bad, that we're creating patterns for ourselves right now. So one of the ways to cope is make sure every day I'm adding in and consuming enough good things for me, right? That the patterns I'm creating now, the behaviors I'm doing now, are they really healthy habits that are going to continue to nurture me, grow myself, grow my sense of leadership, and so that I'm strong enough to help lead my teams, if you will. So consume good things too. You know, I'm all for a good virtual happy hour, but making sure we're now making good choices. I think in those early days, you know, those early weeks, we were all consuming a lot of content, a lot of media, a lot of fear-based messaging, and uncertainty was coming in. And so now, I mean, I'm guessing many of you have had to make some choices about, whoa, that just feels awful to just sit at home at night and watch the news. So I really am encouraging all my leaders and parents, conscious consumption, and that's media. That is what we're drinking. That is what we're eating. That is conscious consumption and connection, right? Connecting with people who make you feel good, not just connecting with your people that are your commiserators, if you will. You know, it's one thing, I think we need to name and talk about our collective experience, but there's also a point in time where when we keep naming it, we keep using negative words over and over and over, like crisis, 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 challenge, 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 I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm stressed. You know, that repetition is training the brain to pay more attention to those things. One of the cool things I've really noticed last week and this week when I've been on coaching calls and other meetings with clients is I'm hearing hope and optimism coming back. Leaders really being intentional about talking about a hopeful future, shifting that language. Leaders, I think, now are really ready. And some of you are just naturally wired that way. You're just naturally maybe a little bit more optimistic. I think the majority of people have to work on that. And so finding leaders really consciously putting that messaging in there about resilience and hope, and we will get through this, while right next to that, still acknowledging reality, the reality of situations and the hardness of it.
What is one thing, is that the thing that you would suggest that we put into practice now? I mean, what can we do with our teams and families that would feel like we're making a positive adjustment?
Yeah, I think to me it's conscious consumption. I think that's it. Just being really aware of everything you're letting into your mind and your body, and making good choices about that. And again, whether that's food or beverages or entertainment, and really being careful, because what we're doing throughout this is, we're always throughout our lifetime developing more and adding more to our inner resources, right? And I think most leaders tend to be pretty conscious and pretty self-aware. And I know your groups are, Elizabeth, but throughout our lifetime, we keep layering on top of that. And right now, we're all adding to our sense of resilience and adaptation. And so I would say, being very aware of how open we all are on one hand, and how many patterns we're potentially laying down. And that's for the good. We're all learning new technology. We're all doing self-enrichment things. We're having different types of interactions. But on the flip side of that, I think people are also going toward things and maybe doing things they wouldn't typically do, And again, I'm all for a walk in the middle of the day. I'm all for a good power nap. I think that's a healthy thing, and that's okay, But the reverse of that would be taking a 4-hour nap every single day. That's not going to help you or your family or your kids, right? So,
right.
Conscious consumption, and really, I think that would be my one tip. There's lots, but I'll stop there.
I think that's a good one, and one that you can apply to your children as well.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot about having, showing grace and giving space to ourselves and our kids during this time. But, some good habits are good as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, I always liked I think this came from Jack Canfield many years ago, the quick equation, E times R equals O. The event times our response equals the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right now we're all managing our response, right? And in the early days, when it was just so alarming and different, and none of us had ever been through it, our responses were one thing. And I think as leaders, we're continuing to have to manage our response to influence that outcome. And that will be true again as we begin to shift back into work and modified work schedules and all of that kind of thing. Because your culture of your team and your organization is continuing right now, even virtually. So are you acting and behaving and leading now and setting the tone based on your vision of the leader you want to be? You're not some other person. And so consciously creating now too.
I love that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Ricky, tell us about your team and what you've been noticing in terms of their mental health and emotional well-being. And also, if you could tell us how the students are doing.
Yeah, thank you. And, thank you to Dr. Teel. That was a great commentary and analysis of what we are in fact dealing with. I took down a lot of notes. I am so proud of my team at San Diego City College. As someone who's worked at a number of colleges, I have the best team. And yes, I'm biased, I know, but I regularly tell people that I would hang out with the folks on my team, even if I didn't work at San Diego City College. But I'm so blessed to work at the college. And there are a number of reasons to be proud. I don't take lightly that we were able to move an 18,000 student campus, nearly 1,000 employees, if you include the 300 full-time and part-time. And in as little as a week and a half, we ventured into what I'm going to call uncharted waters. I mean, certainly we have always taught distance education courses, but when you're talking about 100% of your classes and 100% of your student support services, moving a big ship such as City College on a dime to go remotely Folks rose to the occasion because that's the level of expertise and professionalism of my colleagues. And they have continued to keep students at the core of what they do. It was not perfect. It was organic. We learned from things. We made mistakes. But at the core of what we were doing or seeking to do, frankly, was love. Our love for our profession, our love for students, our love for our community. And what I saw was some things, and I agree with Dr. Teel that this is a new reality, but there's some lessons learned that are positive. We have seen some folks who are experts at teaching online and distance education, help those who, in fact, had never done it. And to be able to have that kind of modeling has developed some relationships that may not have been forged had we not dealt, with this virus. And I too live in this new world called Zoom, and I'm still trying to figure out whether I like it or not. But it's actually far more engaging than I could have ever thought. And I've been doing Zoom webinars and GoToWebinars for probably 10 or 15 years. And these have been far more engaging than I ever thought that they could be. And so there are some positive things. And again, I agree with Dr. Teel that we keep hope at the center. And if I'm a researcher, so Gallup has indicated that the single predictor of success, and when it comes to students, is in fact hope. It's not some fancy intervention or whatnot. It is the ability to instill hope. And as leaders, that probably is, without a doubt, our number one thing that we have to do. I mean, we can't talk doomsday forever. We have to turn the page and begin to prepare for tomorrow. And in fact, we're having those discussions on campus right now. Like, what does it look like to bring people back to work? What are their fears? What are their anxieties? And how can we begin to chip away at some of those things? Again, realizing that it's not going to be perfect. This virus doesn't have a mind. It doesn't have feelings. None of us can predict how it's going to be, how it's going to respond. And that level of uncertainty is, in fact, what builds anxiety amongst us all. And so what we've been doing as a college is telling people to not isolate, right? It's very easy to isolate because, frankly, some of us may not have the most positive living conditions. Many people go to work to avoid what it may be like at home. And so trying to acknowledge that we wish to be back at work, and what does that look like? So beginning to discuss it and instilling hope that we will return one day to see one another and those great colleagues that we love. And so we're having discussions. We've had a number of town halls for students, for employees. In fact, we're having one tomorrow so that we provide a platform to stay engaged with our employees, our family members. We consider them our family. We spend more time at work, many of us, than we do at home. And so we want to connect with our family members. We've allowed people to go back on campus and get things retrieve things that they may have forgotten. We're working at home. I'm working in my bedroom. My partner's spouse is on the other end of the house. We're fortunate that, frankly, we still have our jobs. There are upwards of 30 million people who have lost their jobs, and many of our employees and our students have a loved one that has been negatively impacted by this. And I'm not just talking about working remotely, but in fact, possibly not having a job. So acknowledging those things and acknowledging that people have anxiety over whether they'll lose their job or not. And I'm so fortunate to work in a great district, the San Diego Community College District, where we have assured our full-time employees that we're very well positioned to not have to do layoffs in the immediate future. Certainly the uncertainty of the economy, we can't speak for 18 months out or whatnot, but we don't foresee having to lay off a single person. But we do have part-time employees that are impacted by this in faculty. Student-wise, we're very fortunate to have a laptop drive. Jim Senegal, co-founder of Costco, is an alum of City College. We called him up. We've got his bat line, his personal phone number. And I don't take that lightly to have a billionaire's personal phone number. You only call when you really need something. And sure enough, Jim answered the phone and said, how could he help? And he used his personal credit card to allow us to purchase about 500 laptops. And so we were able to disseminate those laptops to very deserving students. And our own employees went into their pockets and raised $12,000 in a 24-hour period. And so, you know, I have so many things that I can say about how proud I am, but the number one thing is that people said, how can I help? I want to help. I want to be a part of the solution. So that's that hope that Dr. Teel is talking about. And so we're creating platforms and resources for our employees, our family members to be able to help students. And students are very grateful. Many of them showed up crying that we thought enough of them that we would give them not only a laptop, we purchased Wi-Fi hubs as well. There's a very real digital divide that is rearing itself during this stay-at-home, shelter-in-place process. I think that's a good place maybe to stop.
That's wonderful. Thank you for your leadership on that. That's so important, activity and that digital divide. So thank you. Ricky, as a leader, how do you create that space for expressions of emotion in the people who work with you? And also, how are your emotions showing up in your leadership?
Yeah, you know, the wall that Dr. Teel talked about is very real, and many of my team members started exhibiting those kind of behaviors or stress levels, I would say about a week ago, and many of them hit their pinnacle this week. And so doing check-ins, even with my executive team, I was on a call this morning and last night with our vice presidents, and I could tell that many of them have been working around the clock for these 2 months. And frankly, I have to require that they take a day off. Like, take a day off. It'll be here when you get back. We'll hold things afloat. We'll keep them afloat. But you know, leading by example. I go fishing. I love to get out on the water, primarily lakes, not ocean. And so I talk openly about having an outlet. And I was very fortunate as a young professional that many of my mentors talked about that too. Now, I don't necessarily believe that there's this thing called balance. I believe that life is more like ebbs and flows. They're either on the way up or on the way down or somewhere in the middle. But with that said, everybody needs an outlet. One of the things that I've taken pride in doing that, frankly, I didn't get to do prior to this pandemic. And it is important that we say that this is a pandemic. Many of us have not lived through this, right? So there's no playbook. We're trying to figure this out as we go along. And so acknowledging that I don't have all the answers, that I require the folks on my team to showcase leadership, right? We're all leaders. Matter of fact, the root of the term education is Latin, educo, which means to lead, right? So I routinely say that everyone on my team, from the person working in facilities to the persons with the fancy titles, are all leaders, and they're all very important, not one being more so than the other. But the thing I've been doing and talking about to my team, I've been cooking. You know, normally as a college president, I don't get to cook dinner, and I've been cooking 3 or 4 days a week. Matter of fact, I'm not even sure my spouse or my children knew that I could cook. And I've been able to do so because while I'm spending far more time in Zoom meetings, I don't have as many of what we call those chicken dinners, those evening events where we're going to some kind of benefit event. Like, you know, many of those things have been canceled. And so I found myself actually having more time in the evening than I traditionally would as a college president. And I've been trying to fill that time, those new habits that Dr. Teel talked about, right? We want to take on new positive habits. And so I've been able to cook. Just so happens that I bought a barbecue prior to the pandemic kicking in, and I've been getting a lot of use of that. The other thing that I talk very openly about, Elizabeth, and I have, is the benefit of mental health. Most companies have an employee assistance program. I had a counseling or therapy session just last week, and I was sharing with our team of managers. We had our managers meeting on Tuesday, that the therapist said that it was the most intense session that he had ever had. Well, what happens when you get 2 therapists on the call in a session can be very, very, you know, sparks can fly. But I'm very open about needing to take a mental health day, whether that be fishing, whether that be walking, whether that be cooking, whether that be actually seeing a therapist. We should not be ashamed. And I come from a community as a Black man where very often in my community, therapy is seen as something negative. I don't believe that. And so I talk openly, particularly to males and folks from underrepresented communities that may not look at therapy for what it is. And simply put, it's just having a conversation with someone who may not be emotionally attached to whatever you may be going through, so you get some feedback and bounce things off of them. And frankly, I've made some great friends out of the therapists that I've met through the employee assistance program, which allows our employees in my district and at the colleges I've worked at, you get 4 free sessions. They're free. Why wouldn't you take advantage to speak to someone and maybe make a new friend or get a counter narrative or feedback? And so I talk to our employees and encourage them. We routinely email how to set up an appointment and that sort of thing, so that they don't look at it as a negative thing. We're all going stir crazy, staying in the same place with the same group of people, learning a new routine, as Dr. Teel said. And so what better way to recenter and get some of those things that the anxiety that we're dealing with out than to talk to someone. And so we highly encourage our employees. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't say and mention that we have this amazing health center at City College. Again, I'm biased, but I believe I have the 2 best professionals in mental health on a college campus, and Dr. Dottie Cordell, who's our health center director, and Leslie Easton, who's our director of mental health services. And they do amazing check-ins with students. Matter of fact, they were some of the first folks, along with our counselors and advisors, to go remotely. And so they didn't want to abandon their students who were coming to see them on campus. And so they're taking phone appointments, they're taking Zoom appointments. And that's so important, particularly for a college like City, who serves a lot of first-generation college students who are battling things and may be homeless, maybe veterans, and a series of things that we see at the community college versus the 4-year. And so maybe that's a great place to stop.
Sorry about that, folks. I love the idea of the day off, and at the chamber and lead, our CEO, Jerry Sanders, and COO, Jamie Bradford, told us last week, pick a day this week and just take it off, close your computers, don't look at your phone. And, it's hard to do and you have to rearrange some things, but, I did that yesterday and it was really nice to just put my feet in the ocean just for a couple hours. It was really just a nice reset and nice grounding. So I love that idea. Ricky, what is one thing that you would have us all put into practice today?
I think it's referring back to this notion of using therapy, having someone who you can speak to that is not emotionally connected to whatever it is you're going through. Very often we see counsel in the very people who are going through what we're going through ourselves. And so there's something to be said about seeing someone who is trained in therapy, who can help you process through what it is you're going through. A lot of us are self-isolating because we're at home and this is a new reality. And so we need some assistance developing those positive behaviors that Dr. Teel was referencing. And so, maybe you don't have a hobby, maybe you don't have a barbecue, maybe you don't have the tools in your toolkit to help you cope with this new reality. And that's really where a therapist, particularly for those individuals who work at a company where they provide employee assistance program, why not take advantage of those opportunities? And then even if you don't, even if you work at a company that doesn't provide that, a lot of therapy companies who provide therapy have gone online or gone remotely and still can be available to you because there is a lot of pressure of the unknown. Will I have a job? What will tomorrow look like? And then lastly, turn off the news. At some point or another, turn off the news, pick up a book, because the media is bombarding us with doomsday. I believe the last statistic that I saw that is such, and this is real, folks, so don't get me wrong, the coronavirus is real and people are dying from it. But when you look at the positive, right? So Dr. Teel talked about, resilience. 90+%, I actually think it's somewhere around 98%, somewhere between 95 and 98% of the folks who receive or contract the coronavirus will survive. And so that in itself is hope. Knowing that if you do find yourself in a situation where you contracted, God forbid, that you're more likely, unless you have a pre-existing health condition, you're more likely to recover from it. And I wish the media would talk in those terms when they're doing all of these reports, is to say, yes, we know that, you know, 1 million plus people have contracted it, but let's give the positive, let's give the hope that many people who contract it actually are going to survive it. And then one last thing, because you triggered something when you mentioned the ocean. You know, we're in San Diego, a beautiful place, the best place I've ever lived. I took my family to the beach last night. You know, there's that algae bloom going on. And it was the most amazing visual experience, not to mention just having fresh ocean air. I have a 10-year-old. And so we got out of the house, we went to the beach last night, and to see those beautiful turquoise colors and blue colors, there was something to be said about that in terms of meditation and the like.
That is so cool. I love that. It sounds like a great experience. And I so agree with you on the consumption of news. And before all this happened, I put into practice a really good piece of advice that I had read on a blog that I follow. And that was to subscribe to newsletters that are kind of like news roundups, so that provides you all, you know, in one reading. And by the time that newsletter goes out, there will have been some context added to it. And it's not so hurried and frantic and doesn't drive your stress level up. But so I've done that, and I think it makes a world of difference. We're going to take some questions now from our audience. And the first one here is from Aisha Taylor to Dr. Teel. Can you say more about how we're stepping into our human experience?
Where to go with that one? Yeah. You know, despite, you know, the downsides to everything that's happened, I really have enjoyed this great pause and this great equalizer in an interesting way. And even though people have suffered and are losing jobs, and people are losing family members that have been ill, and just losing family members that would have probably already happened anyway, but that experience has been different. But the fact that all of us collectively are having so much of the same experiences at the same time, I really believe it's highly bonding. And I think for a culture, like, just speaking very North American, US focused, where as a country, we tend to be more individualistic, and in our, you know, the ups and the downsides of our capitalistic ways, we're a very individualistic society. Not every culture group is that way, but I think it's wonderful for us to have a collective experience to, at the same time, it creates bonding. You know, I think it creates a way for us to connect. But the downside of it is we are still human, and I think we're all having to still very much manage our biases and our judgments, and because we have lots of opinions about everything that's happening, right? Yes. And at the beginning of this, I was really initially disappointed, because I think everybody was just on such high alert. People were saying things. They were really letting their biases show very quickly, very explicitly, and biases and judgments, and saying things that I think in any other environment would have required HR intervention.
Because of the stress that they were under? Is that?
Yes, exactly. And it just a sense of not feeling safe, you know, and when we don't feel safe, we can tend to lash out. But as time has went on, and we have been in this collective experience, and people have had a chance to talk about it and normalize the experience, and I do think it has helped us, I think, in general as a society. The only thing I would say as a model to reference related to the human experience, if everybody wanted just a quick model for yourself and for your teams as you're navigating, is go look up, you know, the change curve, or Kubler-Ross's loss, you know, grief and loss, you know, curve. It's a really great model to just have in front of us, right? That we tend to go through shock. The event happens, then we go through kind of a shock denial, almost paralyzation, numbness. Then we move to blame, blaming self or blaming others. And in the early days, we saw a lot of blame happening. And then beyond that, once we get past the blame and we realize, oh, heck, this is real, we tend to go into a slump, right? A valley, which for some people it's depression, other people it's insecurity. It's really a low mood state anyway, whether it's, you don't have to call it clinical depression, but we all, I think, had a slump. And many people can stay in that valley. We kind of refer to it as like the valley of death, and you can just spin for a long time, especially if you don't have good resources, personally, professionally. But on the other side of that slump and that deep curve in this human experience we're having, the other side of that starts to be the uptick, that where you start to see people taking action. You start to see people testing and experimenting with new things, stepping toward what's happening. And it's really the experimentation and testing that then tips us all over to acceptance. Like, okay, we're going to be here a while. I might as well learn Zoom, right? Or whatever it is. Then it's that testing, experimentation, acceptance. Then it moves us to that place of hope and optimism. But we can't get to the hope and optimism without first going through those other cycles. So I would say, as we're all still navigating this experience, to be aware of, we're all at different points in time on that. Mm-hmm. It's not just a straight path. Sometimes we go forward and we dip back down. Mm-hmm. And to be hyper alert that in this shared experience, whereas we might be seeing an uptick now where people have more accepted and moving on and they're learning new things, as we transition, have yet another transition, people will be going through a lot of the same cycles again. So that was a long answer.
There's a lot of recalibrating that we have to do along the way, right? Can we talk about children for a moment, and how I would think that this is a wonderful opportunity for children to be kind of learning and practicing empathy and compassion. And as parents, how can we cultivate that in them so that they can kind of learn how to start taking care of themselves and their siblings and their family? And maybe I'll have you start first, Ricky, on this one.
Yeah, well, first, in honor of Teachers Appreciation Week, I want to send a shout out to Miss Frost, my 10-year-old daughter's teacher. She is doing an amazing job. I believe teachers are underpaid grossly, and every one of them should receive an award. I have a 17-year-old and a 10-year-old in the house, and I actually think that they are handling this better than the adults. They are Zooming and connecting with their friends in a way, frankly, that they prefer, because, a lot of education is so prescribed, particularly at that level. Like, you've got to go to school between 8 and you're done at 3, that now they get to work on their own terms. Like, I know what my assignments are. I'll get them done at the times that I prefer to do it. And so, I'm looking at how the adults in the house are responding to the children, who basically are telling the adults, like, look, I've got this. If I don't have it, I'll come to you. Or if let me do it the way I want to do it. And so that's been a little bit of a struggle and a learning process, because they're going through this in a way that's very different than the adults. Now, with that said, the whole body of research around screen time needs to be adjusted, because now all of their work is done on these devices. And I'm struggling with this as a parent, to find some level of understanding between what should I be okay with the number of hours that they're spending on these devices, versus my daughter was playing softball when this all happened, and she's not going to get to finish her season. But we invested all these resources into hitting tees and nets. And so factoring in, hey, you need to get outside still. I mentioned we went to the beach last night, but we put in the physical piece of this. But the fact of the matter is that she still misses her friends, even though they can come together in this virtual world that we've created, or or whatnot. So I'm saying all that to say that children are resilient by nature, but they still need parental involvement to monitor these things. And they're learning, and I think the positive thing of what they're learning is I see my daughter becoming a better typer. She's had to learn how to use the internet in ways that she didn't know prior. And so again, that hopefulness comes out of this, that you get to see the development in areas that she may not have developed had this virus or pandemic not occurred.
Shanna, what would you like to add to that?
I think one of the things I think about is the fact that we all are wired to mirror each other. And, so I think, children and adults, right? So I think as adults, as you are creating routines for yourself and healthy habits for yourself, and you're releasing your energy intellectually and physically, that your children will mirror that. Versus on the other side of that, if you're doing the 4-hour nap and the eating a bag of chips every afternoon, and your children are seeing that as well. So being very aware that we are wired to mirror each other, and that's positive, negative, and neutral. And as well, and the kids are mirroring each other now too, right? They, I think there's a massive mirroring going on with all the TikTok videos and the dancing, and I think that's actually really cool. But it's showing how susceptible we are to mirroring. I would also say we need release in both ways, not just intellectual, but physical. And I think that's one of the hard things, I think, for parents, is how do you get their energy out, right? Especially depending what your living circumstances are and how much space you have. But I've heard parents, if they have a Peloton or a treadmill, my 11-year-old nephew is on the Peloton every morning at 11 o'clock at 9 o'clock before he starts his schoolwork, because if not, by noon, he is a crazy person, because he just has so much energy and he's used to being in after school sports. And so we need to meet, physical needs as much as intellectual needs, and build in playtime and play dates. I think that's one of the things I'm encouraging, is take time out during the day to have a play date, to give them special attention and time. Because right now we're just all glued to our computers because we feel like we have to, and we're learning new skills and we're wanting to be connected, and we're all wanting to add value, I think, too, with whatever communities we're in. And so we have to be really conscious about creating time, and how do I add value and create separate space for kids, and so that they feel that attention.
That's
and
great.
Attunement is the word I'm looking for. Attunement is that we're attuned to them, their experience, their energy, their emotions. And what are we doing once we're attuned to that, right? That's really the basis of emotional intelligence. Are we just telling them, you're annoying, go away? Or are we saying, okay, go away, but we have a break time from 12 to 1 today, and giving them that space to know that you've listened and then you've done something about it.
Can you talk about that attunement with a team that you're leading? How can you be attuned to the anxiety that they might be suffering from? Maybe they're not talking about it because they don't feel comfortable for whatever reason. Tell us about how to be attuned to what's happening with your team.
Do you want me to start?
Sure, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, we have to be careful that we're not assuming everybody's having the same experience. I know Dr. Jones on our team talks a lot about that. Like, not everybody is anxious. Many people are anxious, but so we have to create ways that we are connecting with our team to check in about their real experience and real emotions. Because I don't know that unless you're in a really small group call, you may not be saying that. You might just be still doing the socially appropriate answer. And so as leaders, really going toward our people and understanding what their experience is. And I even have people who are having really positive experiences that have felt like they can't share because so many people are expressing the negative side of the experience.
Right.
And I had a client last week I was listening in on a team call, and she goes, well, I'm just going to say it. I'm crushing quarantine, and she said, nobody's allowed me to say that until now, but I'm telling you, I'm crushing it because I'm eating good. I'm exercising every day. I'm sleeping, my family's on a good routine. And so I thought that was just interesting, but we have to check in.
To her.
Exactly. She's pretty special. But I think that's it. We can't rely on just these formats, to really know what's going on with our people, and giving them tools and resources like the change curve or the loss curve to give them words to put toward their experience, and just even saying, well, where are you on this curve? Where are you today? And moving into our next phase, where do you anticipate you're going to be? Are you still on the hope and optimism and ready to go? Or are you kind of fearful and going backwards? I'm now hearing people say, gosh, I'm in such a good routine now. I've loved, cooking every night. And like, how am I going to go back to those chicken dinners, for example, all the faculty meetings? And like, oh, I'm not looking forward to it. So people are really now having a different level of stress and anxiety about, there's some things I really don't want to go back to. So.
That's exciting, right? The opportunity to reinvent some things, right?
Absolutely.
Ricky, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, there certainly are opportunities in any crisis or emergency. And so taking note of them and giving praise to those folks who are exhibiting innovative, creative things that others may not be aware of, right? So as a leader, we're called to give both coaching and acknowledgement to the members of our team, and showcasing the great efforts of those members. We've had probably far more meetings to do check-ins because we are concerned about the social, emotional intelligence of the folks on the team. And sometimes we just don't have an agenda. To just say, look, we want to see how people are doing, because your colleagues may be either thriving or challenged by the same thing. So let's just do a check-in with no agenda. The other thing is making those phone calls to people to do check-in, so that not everyone is willing to share in a group setting. So realizing that everyone has different traits, and those folks who are quiet, very often those are the ones you need to check in with first, because they're not forthcoming with how they're doing. Those are the things that we've been doing. We've also had a couple of opportunities to bring people back on campus, because people do love our campus. Mentioned the laptop giveaways. We had to turn some people away. So many folks wanted to come back. And then others, is just listening is so important, because you want to value your team members. Some of our faculty members say, look, we want to help, but if I could just go into my space and shoot a video, well, hey, let's see how we can facilitate that using social distancing. And as long as you agree you're not going to meet with 20 or 30 students, why couldn't we let you back into your space to shoot a video? And so acknowledging that members of your team have great ideas about how to get the college through, or the organization through what's going on. And if you could do it, why not support them in that effort? And if you're not, why not work toward a resolution that is mutually beneficial? And so those have been some of the things. There's never enough that you can communicate during an emergency. And so we've also sought out different ways to communicate. I hadn't really done video communication prior to this. A lot of it's been written via email and or a newsletter. And so we started shooting videos for people to try to give them that 1 minute, 2 minute overview. And we received a lot of positive feedback. But again, we've also made some mistakes, like acknowledging when we made mistakes. Many of my faculty in our radio, television, film sent me very interesting emails when I started doing video announcements in spaces like this, like, hey, this is not CNN, folks. I don't have a crew. We sent everyone home. This is organic. Now, I get that you I have a multi-million-dollar TV station and you would rather me do those updates there, but it's been sanitized by the facilities folks. Like, I don't want to put any unnecessary burden on them, but it's been very fascinating to see some of the feedback and just acknowledging when you've made a mistake, but then also when you've learned something that others may be able to benefit from. So I've been sharing a lot of articles with our deans and our chairs, like, hey, this is what this college is doing. What are your thoughts about that? And been getting a lot of positive feedback.
I would say that those mistakes and the messiness has actually been kind of nice, because it's kind of, I think, it's allowed people to loosen up a little bit and try some things that they wouldn't ordinarily try, because it's okay to be a little bit messy, because we're all really messy right now. And we're all kind of, in this together in our own ways. So we have to close now, and I thank you both, Dr. Teel and Dr. Shabazz, for sharing your time and expertise with us, and so many great ideas and so much great advice that I know I'm going to put into practice. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll be back. Oh, yes. We'll be back on May 20th at 2 p.m. to talk about community service during a crisis, how you can serve at a physical distance and how you can cultivate a desire to serve in your children. Joining us for that discussion will be Carol Dietrich, CEO of the San Diego and Imperial Counties Girl Scouts, and Venus Molina, Chief of Staff to San Diego City Council member Jen Campbell, and she's also president of the board at Mana de San Diego. Again, thank you all for joining us, and on behalf of Lead San Diego, I wish you all well, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.